cafe was small and cozy, tucked between two tall buildings in a busy part of the city. Its windows were fogged slightly from the warmth inside, and soft light spilled onto the street where a few people were walking, hurrying by on their way to work or shopping. Inside, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the sweet scent of pastries, creating a comforting atmosphere. The chatter of regular customers filled the air, but it wasn't loud, just the right level of background noise that made the cafe feel welcoming. A man walked in, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his shoes clicking lightly on the wooden floor. He had a confident air about him, the kind of presence that made people glance for a second, noticing someone who seemed used to attention. He looked around, his eyes scanning the room with curiosity. Most of the customers ignored him, focused on their conversations, their laptops, or the quiet enjoyment of a morning coffee. But he noticed her immediately. She was moving quickly and gracefully between the tables, balancing plates and mugs with ease. Her hair was tied back simply, and her apron had a few small stains from a busy morning. She smiled politely at each customer, her eyes kind but slightly tired. It was clear she worked hard, and she did it with care. The man leaned against the counter, pretending to look at the menu, but he couldn't stop watching her. There was something calm and determined in the way she moved, the way she handled every task without fuss. It was a rare sight for him. Usually, people in service seemed either rushed or distracted. Not her. She had a rhythm to her work, and it drew his attention more than he expected. He called out casually, trying to make his voice light and teasing. "I bet you can't play that piano back there," he said, nodding toward the corner where an old upright piano stood. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The wood was worn, and a few keys were slightly chipped. The man smirked, thinking it would be funny if she tried and failed. The waitress paused for a moment, wiping her hands on her apron. She glanced at the piano, then back at him. There was a flicker of hesitation, a tiny shadow crossing her face, but it disappeared quickly. She straightened, lifted her chin slightly, and nodded. "All right," she said simply. "I'll play." A few customers nearby noticed the exchange and started to watch. Some whispered to each other, curious about what would happen. The man leaned back, confident, certain that this would be amusing. He could imagine the awkward notes, the clumsy fingers, the embarrassed smile when she realized she couldn't play. He didn't expect what came next. She walked slowly to the piano, her movements calm and deliberate. Every eye in the cafe followed her, some in disbelief, some in curiosity. She reached the piano and sat down on the small bench. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, not with uncertainty but as if she were gathering her thoughts, ready to speak through the music. The man shifted in his seat, a little uneasy now, because he could sense that this might not go as he expected. Then she pressed a key. The sound was clear and steady, not a simple tap but a note filled with warmth. She played another and then another, slowly at first, as if testing the keys and the acoustics of the room. But there was no hesitation, no awkwardness. Her hands moved with a natural grace, and the melody began to take shape, soft but captivating. It was gentle at first, a tune that could have been played in any quiet moment, yet there was something in it that caught people off guard. The customers stopped their conversations, their heads turning toward the piano. Some leaned on their elbows, their eyes widening. The man's smirk faded, replaced by a curious frown. He had expected a mistake, a stumble, a funny moment, but what he was hearing was music. Real music, coming from someone he had assumed couldn't play. It was soft, yet confident, simple yet expressive. It carried emotion in a way that made the room feel alive, even though the cafe itself hadn't changed at all. As she continued, her playing grew more confident, more fluid. She didn't just hit the keys, she spoke through them. Each note seemed to tell a part of her story. Her quiet determination, her long hours of work, her moments of doubt, and her moments of pride. It was mesmerizing. People who had been sipping coffee or typing on laptops were now completely focused on her, listening to every sound. Even the man, who had come in with a mocking attitude, found himself leaning forward, unable to look away. The piano, old and worn, seemed to come alive under her fingers. The sound echoed slightly, filling the corners of the cafe, making the walls and tables feel like part of the performance. She didn't rush, and she didn't stop to show off. She simply played, letting the music flow naturally. It was the kind of playing that made people forget everything else for a moment. The noise of the street, their busy schedules, even their phones. Some of the cafe regulars were familiar with the piano. They had seen it many times and assumed it was just decoration. They never thought anyone would play it seriously. Yet here she was, turning an old, forgotten instrument into a source of beauty and surprise. Whispers spread quietly among the customers. "Can she really play like that?" one asked. Another nodded, unable to speak because the music had captured all their attention. The man at the counter was shifting uncomfortably now. His plan had completely backfired. He had expected a moment of humor at her expense, a story to tell his friends about the waitress who couldn't play piano. Instead, he was confronted with talent he hadn't anticipated, skill he hadn't predicted, and a presence he couldn't ignore. He tried to smile, but it was awkward, and he found himself staring, caught off guard. For the waitress, it seemed natural. She played as if the piano were an extension of herself, her fingers moving easily across the keys, producing harmony and rhythm without a single note out of place. Her concentration was deep, yet she was aware of the audience, letting them in gently, allowing them to share this moment without breaking the flow of the music. It was a rare combination of confidence and humility that made her performance so compelling. As the last note of the soft passage lingered in the air, a hush fell over the cafe. People were quiet, not because the music had ended, but because they were in awe. Even the man, who had come expecting to mock, could only sit and watch, realizing he had underestimated her completely. There was no embarrassment in her playing, no desire for attention, just pure expression. And in that simple, small cafe, something extraordinary had happened. A waitress had challenged expectations, quietly and gracefully, and in doing so, she had changed the energy of the room completely. The man finally cleared his throat, unsure what to say. He could feel a shift inside him, a mixture of respect and surprise. The audience around them started to murmur softly, some clapping lightly, but no one wanted to break the spell entirely. The moment was delicate, perfect, and unforgettable. And it had all begun with a simple challenge, a casual remark that no one, not even the one who had made it, could have predicted. The cafe, the piano, and the waitress had come together to create something that would linger in memory, a reminder that talent often hides where it is least expected. The moment her fingers had lifted from the final note, a soft wave of silence filled the cafe. Customers exchanged glances, some smiling in disbelief, some whispering softly to each other about the talent they had just witnessed. It was as if the music had left a mark on the room, a lingering warmth that refused to fade. She sat at the piano for a heartbeat longer, letting the sound settle, then straightened slightly, her eyes meeting those of a few nearby customers who were still staring, captivated. The man who had challenged her cleared his throat, trying to regain a sense of composure. He had been confident, sure that he would provoke a little humor, and perhaps a story to tell later about someone who had failed at a simple task. Instead, he had been shown a gift that neither he nor the audience had expected. He studied her for a moment, noticing the calm in her posture, the quiet confidence in her eyes, and the hint of a smile that suggested she had known her own abilities all along. She began to play again, this time a slightly more complex piece. Her fingers moved over the keys with precision and fluidity. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but quickly gained strength. The melody flowed naturally, rising and falling like a conversation, gentle and persuasive. Every movement of her hands carried intention, every note a whisper of her own story. The cafe, once a simple place for coffee and conversation, had become a small concert hall. People leaned forward in their chairs, their mugs and plates forgotten for the moment. One regular, an older woman who came in every morning for her black coffee, had tears in her eyes. She whispered to her friend, barely audible, "I didn't know someone could play like that. Right here." The friend nodded, equally stunned. A group of college students in the corner, who had been joking and laughing a moment ago, had quieted down completely. Their eyes were fixed on her hands, following the rise and fall of the notes, marveling at how she seemed to shape the music as she played. The man at the counter, still leaning slightly, could not look away. His initial pride and amusement had dissolved entirely, replaced by awe and, unexpectedly, respect. He had underestimated her completely. He had expected hesitation, mistakes, maybe a bit of awkwardness. Instead, he was watching someone turn a simple old piano into a living, breathing story. There was an elegance in her movements, a depth in her playing that made him realize he had been blind to what could exist in unexpected places. As the melody continued, the cafe seemed to change. The air felt warmer, more alive. The sound of the piano filled the room, weaving through the tables, reaching every ear and touching every heart. Customers who had been focused on work or conversation had now surrendered to the music. A quiet young man in the corner, who rarely spoke to anyone, was tapping his foot gently, smiling as if the music had unlocked something inside him. A mother with a toddler at a nearby table watched silently, amazed at the grace and focus the waitress displayed. Her child, usually restless, sat still, fascinated by the gentle rhythm. The piece she played was more than just notes and rhythms. It carried emotion, a story of determination, patience, and the quiet moments of life that often went unnoticed. Every chord she struck seemed to reach beyond the piano, connecting with the people around her. The cafe was no longer just a cafe. It was a shared experience, a space where everyone could pause and feel something together. Even the sounds of clinking cups and soft murmurs faded, overtaken by the purity of her music. The man's mind raced as he watched. He thought about the countless times he had underestimated people based on appearance, jobs, or mannerisms. He had assumed she was ordinary, someone who had no reason to surprise anyone. But here she was, breaking every expectation, showing that talent could exist anywhere and in anyone. His respect for her grew silently, and he realized that the lesson was larger than this cafe or this moment. It was about seeing people for who they truly were, not who you assumed them to be. The waitress, meanwhile, remained focused. She played with a rhythm that was both delicate and strong, a balance that seemed effortless yet required years of practice and dedication. She was aware of the audience, but she didn't let it distract her. Her playing was sincere, honest, and human. It was not about impressing anyone, winning any challenge, or proving herself. It was about expressing what she carried inside, and in doing so, she brought life to the small cafe in a way that no one could ignore. As she shifted into a slightly livelier passage, the energy in the room changed. People began to smile openly, some even nodding along with the rhythm. A few customers leaned over to whisper to their friends, saying things like, "She's amazing," or, "I can't believe she's just a waitress." The man's expression softened, and he found himself smiling too, not out of amusement or superiority, but out of genuine appreciation. He had been so sure of the outcome at first, but now he understood that some things were far beyond assumptions. She paused briefly, letting the music hang in the air like a question that had been asked and answered. The cafe remained still, each person caught in the aftermath of what they had just heard. The man finally spoke, his voice low and respectful. "You play beautifully," he said. It wasn't a challenge anymore, nor was it a tease. It was an acknowledgement, simple and sincere, of the talent he had witnessed. She smiled softly, a quiet grace in her response, acknowledging the compliment without seeking more. The customers, inspired by the brief pause, began to clap softly, hesitant at first but then with increasing confidence. The sound grew, filling the room, a celebration of something genuine and unexpected. She acknowledged them with a slight nod, her fingers already preparing to continue. The music resumed, flowing more freely now, carrying the subtle strength of someone who knew what she wanted to convey and how to make it resonate. Each note was a thread connecting the cafe's people, weaving a tapestry of sound that included everyone present, from the regulars to the curious visitors. The man at the counter leaned back, letting the applause wash over him, realizing that he had witnessed something rare. He had expected a brief moment of amusement, something to laugh about later, but instead, he had experienced a human story, told not with words but with music. He understood that he had been challenged in an unexpected way, not by a game or a wager, but by the talent and authenticity of someone who had quietly carried it with her all along. As the performance continued, customers began to whisper about how unusual it was to find such talent hidden in everyday life. They spoke of the hours of practice, the dedication, the courage it must have taken to accept a challenge from a stranger in front of an audience. Their admiration was not just for the music, but for the person creating it, someone who had remained humble and composed while captivating everyone around her. Her final notes rang out, clear and powerful, filling the cafe one last time before fading into silence. The pause afterward was palpable, the kind that lingers because the heart has been touched. The man, who had come in with a smirk and an expectation of mockery, felt a quiet respect settle over him. He had not anticipated this outcome, and in that moment, he realized that assumptions could never capture the depth of human ability and spirit. People began to clap again, louder this time, some standing to express their admiration. Smiles spread across faces, and the warmth of shared experience filled the room. She rose from the piano bench, calm and composed, giving a small nod to the audience. Her humility only made the performance more remarkable, showing that true talent did not need to demand attention. It invited it gently and naturally. The man finally approached her, extending a hand, not to challenge or mock, but to congratulate. She shook it briefly, her smile acknowledging the gesture without arrogance. It was a moment of mutual understanding, a recognition that what had happened was special, rare, and memorable. The cafe returned gradually to its normal rhythm, but the energy remained changed, the memory of the music lingering in every corner, leaving an impression that would not be forgotten. The cafe settled into a calm rhythm after the applause, but the energy lingered, thick and vibrant, as though the music had awakened something hidden in the room. Customers who had been strangers moments ago now felt connected through the shared experience. Even the man who had first challenged her felt a strange sense of quiet, humbled in a way he hadn't expected. He sipped his coffee slowly, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and respect, as if trying to understand how someone so seemingly ordinary could produce such extraordinary music. The waitress returned to her station, collecting plates and refilling drinks, but her presence seemed different now. People no longer just saw her as a server. They saw her talent, her confidence, and the grace with which she carried herself. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in the room, a subtle reverence for someone who had quietly defied expectations. Customers whispered softly among themselves, recounting the performance to anyone who would listen, some even replaying the small video they had taken on their phones, amazed by what they had just witnessed. A young man who had been sitting at a corner table, headphones around his neck, approached her hesitantly. He wasn't trying to interrupt her work, but he wanted to ask a question. "Do you perform anywhere else?" he asked softly, careful not to draw too much attention. She shook her head with a gentle smile. "Not really," she replied. "I just play when I have the chance." His eyes widened slightly. "You're really talented," he said. "You should think about performing for more people." She thanked him, but there was a calm humility in her response. She didn't speak of fame or recognition. Her joy came from the music itself. Meanwhile, the man who had challenged her still sat at the counter, reflecting on what had just occurred. He had come in with a smirk, expecting amusement, and instead had witnessed a transformation. He realized that the moment had taught him something he hadn't expected. Talent, dedication, and courage could appear in the most unlikely places. He thought about all the times he had underestimated people, judged them too quickly, or assumed their abilities based on surface impressions. Watching her, he felt a quiet shift within himself. The cafe's atmosphere was changing in small ways that weren't immediately noticeable. The regulars who had been accustomed to quiet mornings now shared smiles, nods, and quiet laughter, a subtle energy that came from witnessing something rare. The smell of coffee and pastries remained, but the room seemed richer somehow, filled with a sense of possibility and inspiration. People lingered at their tables, hesitant to leave, as if the memory of the music had made the ordinary space feel extraordinary. Encouraged by the curiosity and admiration around her, the waitress moved back to the piano for a second piece. This time, she chose something livelier, more expressive, a piece that demanded attention without needing to shout. Her fingers danced over the keys with confidence, each note precise yet fluid, blending technical skill with heartfelt emotion. The melody was playful, full of surprises and subtle shifts, making it impossible for anyone to look away. The room seemed to breathe with her music, each person feeling the rhythm in a personal way. Customers who had been quiet before now moved subtly in response to the music. One man tapped his fingers on the table in time with the rhythm. A woman smiled, swaying slightly in her seat. Even the barista, usually focused on grinding beans and steaming milk, paused for a moment to listen, captivated by the sound. The energy in the cafe grew, not loud or overwhelming, but warm and shared, like a gentle wave that touched everyone present. The man who had challenged her felt something unexpected stir inside him. He had not anticipated feeling admiration, humility, or even a hint of inspiration from this encounter. Watching her, he realized that his own life, full of schedules, meetings, and expectations, lacked this kind of authentic expression. He found himself wanting to stay, to see the full performance, to understand the depth of her talent. He leaned forward, completely absorbed, feeling the music touch a part of him he had ignored for years. As the piece continued, it became more complex. She added subtle variations, little flourishes, and unexpected pauses that made the melody feel alive. Every note carried intention, every chord suggested emotion. It was as if the piano were a voice, and she was speaking directly to the hearts of everyone in the room. People shifted in their seats, some closing their eyes to focus more fully on the sound. The cafe, once a space for casual conversation, had become a shared sanctuary of music and human connection. A young girl, sitting with her mother, leaned forward on her chair, eyes wide with wonder. She whispered excitedly, "Mom, she's amazing." Her mother nodded, smiling, realizing that her child was witnessing something special, a moment that would likely stay with her forever. Across the room, a few college students were quietly exchanging comments about the skill and control she had over the piano. They had expected a casual performance at best, and now they were in awe of the depth and precision. The man at the counter could feel the collective energy of the room, a subtle but powerful force that came from shared admiration and genuine appreciation. He thought about the assumptions he had made earlier and felt a sense of gratitude for being present. He realized that this encounter was more than just a casual challenge. It was a reminder of the unexpected richness that people could bring into each other's lives if given the chance. It wasn't about talent alone. It was about courage, confidence, and authenticity. As the performance reached a particularly lively section, she allowed herself a small, private smile, enjoying the playfulness of the music. She could see the reactions of the customers, the way their faces lit up, the way their bodies responded to the rhythm. She didn't need applause or recognition. The music itself was enough. Yet, she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her gift had touched so many, even if only for a brief moment. The final notes of the piece were striking, leaving a lingering sense of wonder. There was a brief pause in the cafe, as if everyone was holding their breath, reluctant to break the spell. Then, slowly, soft applause began, spreading from table to table. Some customers clapped enthusiastically, others simply nodded in appreciation, smiles on their faces. Even the man who had first challenged her joined in, his applause genuine, heartfelt, and tinged with respect. She stood, allowing the sound to fade naturally, and returned to her station. She moved with the same grace and calm as before, but there was now a subtle confidence in her step. The cafe felt different, almost transformed, as though her music had left an invisible thread connecting everyone present. Conversations resumed, but with a different energy, lighter, warmer, more appreciative of the moment they had shared. The man approached her once again, more cautious this time, unsure of how to express the respect he felt. "You have a gift," he said quietly, without the teasing tone he had used before. "It's rare to see someone play like that. Thank you for sharing it." She acknowledged him with a gentle nod, a small smile on her lips, her humility intact. She didn't boast or seek validation. Her reward was the quiet joy of knowing she had touched people's hearts. Customers lingered longer than usual, some leaving extra tips, others striking up quiet conversations with her, expressing admiration or curiosity about her experience with the piano. The cafe, already a place of comfort and routine, had become a space of inspiration, a place where ordinary life met extraordinary talent. People left with a sense of wonder, carrying the memory of the music into the rest of their day. Even the man who had entered with a challenge in mind felt changed. He had learned, in an unexpected and profound way, that talent and beauty often appear where they are least expected, and that humility and authenticity can leave a deeper impression than arrogance or certainty ever could. Watching the waitress, seeing her play with such honesty and skill, reminded him of the importance of noticing the extraordinary in the ordinary. He left the cafe later that morning, his coffee untouched, feeling lighter, inspired, and quietly humbled. The young waitress continued her day, carrying herself with the same grace and focus she had always had. Yet there was now a subtle acknowledgement from those around her. Customers smiled knowingly as she approached their tables, some exchanging quiet words of praise, others simply watching in admiration. Her music had made an impact, creating a ripple that extended beyond the notes she had played. She moved with quiet purpose, unassuming yet undeniably remarkable, a presence that reminded everyone that greatness could be found in the most unexpected places. As the afternoon light shifted through the windows, the piano sat quietly in the corner, its worn keys still holding the memory of her performance. The cafe returned to its usual pace, but the energy remained altered, infused with a sense of possibility and appreciation. Every person who had been present carried a part of that moment with them, a reminder that even in everyday spaces, extraordinary moments could unfold when courage, talent, and humility came together in harmony. The cafe had settled into a quiet hum again, but the impact of the performance lingered in every corner. People sipped their coffee slowly, their thoughts lingering on the music they had just heard. Even those who had been talking earlier now seemed reflective, carrying a sense of awe that had touched them in a way words could not capture. The piano, sitting in its corner, seemed to hum with the echoes of the music, as if it remembered every note she had played. The man who had issued the challenge sat quietly, staring at the piano and then back at the waitress. There was no trace of the smirk he had carried earlier. It had been replaced by genuine respect and, perhaps, a quiet sense of humility. He could see that what had just happened was more than a fleeting moment. It was an event that had quietly changed the energy of the cafe and the people within it. He realized that the world was full of people with hidden talents, people who went unnoticed every day, yet had the ability to touch lives in profound ways. The waitress, moving back to her station, carried herself with a calm grace. She greeted customers as she had before, but now the smiles she received seemed different, warmer, more genuine. They were no longer casual greetings. They were acknowledgments of something remarkable, a subtle recognition of her extraordinary skill. She didn't seek attention or validation. Her joy came from the music itself, and yet she understood that she had inspired everyone in the room. Even if only for a few fleeting moments, a young man who had been observing her from a corner table approached cautiously. He had been hesitant at first, unsure if he should interrupt, but the curiosity and admiration he felt compelled him forward. "Do you play often?" he asked quietly, careful not to disturb anyone. She smiled softly, shaking her head. "Whenever I can," she replied. Her answer was simple, yet it carried a sense of depth, a hint that music was a part of her life even when no one was watching. Across the room, an older woman who had been a regular for years whispered to her companion, marveling at the talent she had witnessed. "I never would have guessed she could play like that," she said. "It's incredible to think someone with such skill could be right here among us every day." Her companion nodded, equally impressed, and they both returned to their drinks, now appreciating the cafe in a different light. It wasn't just a place for coffee. It was a space where extraordinary moments could unfold unexpectedly. Encouraged by the quiet attention and admiration, the waitress moved toward the piano once again. This time, she chose a piece that was deeply emotional, a melody that spoke of longing, hope, and resilience. Her fingers moved over the keys with precision and care, creating a sound that filled the cafe with a new kind of energy. The notes were gentle yet powerful, carrying a depth of feeling that seemed to reach directly into the hearts of everyone present. People paused in their activities, drawn into the music, letting it wash over them without distraction. The man at the counter felt a wave of realization. He had come in expecting a trivial moment of amusement, a simple challenge to entertain himself. Instead, he was witnessing something profound, a display of talent, courage, and authenticity that left him humbled. He understood, perhaps for the first time that morning, that genuine expression and skill could create a lasting impact, far beyond the immediate moment. Watching her play, he felt a shift within himself, a reminder of the value of noticing and appreciating the extraordinary in ordinary places. The piece grew more complex as she continued, the music rising and falling with emotion and intensity. Customers who had been quiet moments ago now leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on her hands as they danced across the keys. A young girl sitting near the window clutched her mother's hand, her eyes wide with wonder, whispering, "Mom, listen to her. She's amazing." The mother smiled, recognizing the spark of inspiration that had just touched her child, a memory that would likely stay with her forever. The waitress played with a mixture of confidence and humility, aware of the audience but not influenced by it. Each note was intentional, each chord carrying meaning, yet she did not seek to impress. She simply shared her gift, allowing the music to speak for her. The cafe seemed to breathe with her, every table and chair, every person present, part of a collective experience that transcended the ordinary. Even the hum of conversation and the clinking of cups seemed to pause, absorbed into the flow of the melody. The man watched, captivated, feeling a blend of admiration and introspection. He thought about how often he had judged people based on appearances or roles, assuming he could predict their abilities or worth. Here, in this small cafe, he realized the folly of such assumptions. Talent and greatness often hid where they were least expected, waiting for a chance to emerge. He felt gratitude for being present, for witnessing something genuine and rare, and for being reminded that humility and authenticity could inspire more than pride or arrogance ever could. As she transitioned into the final section of the piece, the energy in the cafe shifted once more. The music was now expressive, full of layers and subtle nuances that made it impossible for anyone to ignore. The customers responded instinctively, some nodding along with the rhythm, others closing their eyes to fully absorb the emotion. The cafe had become a shared space of reflection and connection, where the ordinary and the extraordinary intertwined seamlessly. Every note she played seemed to weave a story that included everyone in the room, making them part of something larger than themselves. The performance reached its climax with a series of powerful chords that resonated deeply, filling the cafe with a sense of completion and fulfillment. There was a pause, brief and delicate, where the music hung in the air, leaving a silence that was almost reverent. The audience, moved and captivated, began to clap softly, their appreciation growing steadily as the sound spread. Some customers stood, unable to contain their admiration, while others smiled quietly, savoring the lingering beauty of the moment. The waitress allowed the final note to linger before rising from the piano bench, her presence calm and composed. She returned to her station with a gentle smile, acknowledging the applause without seeking more. Her performance had not been about recognition or validation. It had been an expression of her own inner strength and passion. Yet, in sharing it, she had created a ripple effect, inspiring everyone present and leaving a lasting impression. The man, who had come in with a challenge in mind, approached her once more. His tone was respectful, stripped of the earlier smugness. "That was incredible," he said simply. "I didn't expect any of this. Thank you for sharing your gift." She nodded politely, her humility intact, a quiet acknowledgement of his words. It was a moment of understanding, of mutual respect, where no further explanation was needed. The impact of her music had spoken more eloquently than any conversation could. The cafe gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but the atmosphere remained subtly changed. Customers lingered longer, savoring their drinks, exchanging quiet conversations about what they had witnessed. The energy was warmer, richer, filled with a sense of possibility and inspiration. The piano, once an overlooked piece of furniture, now sat in its corner as a symbol of hidden talent and unexpected beauty, a reminder that extraordinary moments could appear in the most ordinary settings. The waitress moved through her tasks with quiet purpose, still humble, still focused, yet carrying the knowledge that she had touched lives that day. Each interaction, each smile, was imbued with a subtle connection, a reflection of the music and the courage it had taken to share it. Customers left with a renewed sense of appreciation for the unexpected, the remarkable, and the authentic, carrying the memory of her performance with them into the world beyond the cafe. The man lingered a moment longer, sipping his coffee, feeling a mixture of gratitude and introspection. He had come seeking amusement and left with a lesson, a reminder of the extraordinary potential in those who were often overlooked. As he stepped out into the bustling city street, he carried with him a quiet sense of inspiration, a recognition that moments like these were rare and precious, and that talent, courage, and humility could leave a lasting impression on everyone who had the chance to witness them. The cafe had returned to its familiar rhythm, the quiet hum of conversation and the gentle clinking of cups filling the air once more. But something invisible had changed, lingering in the space like a soft echo. The music that had just been played seemed to have left an imprint, a reminder of what could happen when courage, talent, and authenticity came together. Customers moved about more thoughtfully, their smiles warmer, their gestures gentler, as if the world outside could not contain the feeling that had filled the room. The waitress returned to her tasks, placing plates carefully on tables, refilling drinks, and greeting regulars with the same polite attentiveness she always had. Yet there was a subtle shift in the way people looked at her. She was no longer just the friendly face serving coffee. She was the musician who had transformed the space, who had reminded everyone that greatness could exist where it was least expected. Some customers whispered quietly to each other, replaying the notes they had heard in their minds, still marveling at the skill and emotion that had emerged from such a humble place. The man who had issued the original challenge remained at the counter, finishing his coffee slowly, lost in thought. He had walked in expecting a casual moment of amusement, a small story to tell later, and instead, he had been confronted with something extraordinary. Watching the waitress play had forced him to reconsider his assumptions, to recognize that true talent and authenticity were often hidden behind ordinary appearances. He felt a quiet respect, almost awe, and a sense of humility he rarely experienced. It was a reminder that he had underestimated not just her, but countless others he had passed by without noticing. As the morning continued, a few regulars approached the waitress, asking her about her background, how long she had played, and if she performed elsewhere. She answered simply, explaining that she played whenever she had the chance and for the joy of music itself. Her humility shone through every word. She did not speak of ambition or recognition. Her satisfaction came from the act of creating, from sharing something that touched people's hearts. The sincerity in her voice and the calm confidence in her demeanor left a lasting impression on everyone she spoke to. A young man who had been lingering at a table approached her with a hesitant smile. "I saw the video of you playing," he said quietly, showing her his phone. "You should think about performing for more people. You're really talented." She thanked him politely, her smile soft and composed. She appreciated the encouragement but remained grounded, focused on the joy of her music rather than the pursuit of fame. Her response was simple yet powerful, a quiet acknowledgement of the beauty in sharing her gift without needing validation. Meanwhile, the cafe seemed to hum with a new energy. Customers lingered longer than usual, talking softly about what they had witnessed. Conversations shifted from everyday matters to reflections on the performance, on the talent and courage it had taken to accept the challenge and play with such depth and confidence. Some shared their own experiences with music, art, and hidden talents, inspired by the reminder that extraordinary things could emerge in unexpected places. The man at the counter finally spoke again, more thoughtfully this time. "You've changed this place today," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Not just with your music, but with the way people see the world, even if only for a moment." She nodded, acknowledging his words without arrogance or pretense. Her music had done more than entertain. It had created a ripple effect, touching people in ways she could never fully see. The subtle power of her performance was in its authenticity, the way it spoke directly to the heart without demanding attention. A small group of students who had come in for coffee earlier lingered to ask her questions. They were fascinated by the skill and emotion in her playing, curious about how she had learned to express herself so effectively through music. She shared a few simple insights, explaining that practice, patience, and love for the art were what mattered most. Her answers were practical, humble, and deeply human, leaving the students inspired and reflective. They realized that talent was not just a product of training but of dedication, courage, and the willingness to share something meaningful. As the day progressed, more customers noticed the piano and stopped to watch her, drawn not just by curiosity but by the stories they had heard from others. Her performances were spontaneous yet deliberate, each note carrying intention and emotion. The music became a thread that connected people, weaving a tapestry of shared experience and quiet joy. Even those who had been skeptical initially found themselves captivated, reminded that unexpected beauty could emerge when least anticipated. By the afternoon, the cafe had become something more than a simple place for coffee. It had transformed into a space of inspiration, a place where people came not only to eat or drink, but to witness a rare example of courage, talent, and humility. The piano, once an overlooked fixture, had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that greatness could exist in ordinary places if one only took the time to notice. Every note she played left a mark, a gentle nudge that encouraged people to reconsider their assumptions and see the extraordinary in the everyday. The man who had first challenged her realized that he had learned something invaluable. He had come seeking amusement, expecting to be entertained at someone else's expense, and instead had been given a lesson in humility, talent, and the unpredictable power of human expression. He watched her move with quiet purpose, carrying herself with grace and modesty, and understood that true impact often came from authenticity and sincerity rather than showmanship or pretense. Customers began to leave gradually, but the memory of the music remained with them. Some walked out with thoughtful expressions, others exchanged quiet words of admiration, and a few lingered to speak with the waitress, expressing their gratitude for the experience. She greeted each person with the same warmth and calm she had always shown, but there was now an added layer of recognition in their eyes. They understood that they had witnessed something special, a moment that transcended ordinary life. As evening approached, the cafe quieted once more. The sun cast long shadows through the windows, and the soft glow of the interior lights reflected off the polished surfaces. The piano sat in its corner, still and silent, holding the memory of the music it had produced. The waitress moved through the space, finishing her tasks with care and precision, her demeanor unchanged yet subtly transformed by the day's events. She had shared her gift, touched lives, and left an indelible mark on the hearts of those who had been present. The man lingered a few moments longer, taking a final sip of his coffee before standing to leave. He offered a quiet nod of respect to the waitress, a silent acknowledgement of the impact she had made. Outside, the city continued its usual pace, unaware of the small, extraordinary moments that had unfolded within the cafe. He walked away with a sense of reflection and inspiration, carrying with him the reminder that talent, courage, and authenticity could change not only a room but also the way one viewed the world. The waitress returned to the piano one last time that evening, gently pressing a few keys in a soft, improvisational melody. It was not for an audience, not for recognition, but for herself. A quiet celebration of the day, the music, and the unexpected connections that had formed. Each note was a reminder of her own strength, her dedication, and the power of sharing her gift. The cafe, the piano, and the people who had been touched by her performance were forever linked through that music, a testament to the beauty that could be found in courage and authenticity. As night fell, the cafe doors closed, leaving the space silent except for the lingering echoes of the day's events. The piano sat in its corner, a humble witness to the extraordinary, and the waitress tidied up, her heart quietly full. She had played not knowing how much impact she would have, and yet the outcome was undeniable. She had changed the energy of the room, inspired those who had been present, and reminded everyone, including herself, that even in ordinary life, moments of extraordinary beauty could unfold when courage and talent were allowed to shine. The cafe remained a simple place, but it now held the memory of a day that would not be forgotten by those who had experienced it. The man, the customers, the students, the regulars, they all carried with them a story of unexpected talent, quiet confidence, and the transformative power of music. And the waitress, continuing her life with the same humility and dedication, had shown that greatness often appears where it is least expected, leaving a lasting impression that transcends time and place.